All right, guys, we got a heavy episode today. Sitting down with Raffi,
Oh yeah.
we we decided today, probably about 4 hours ago. It's 1 a.m. in the morning that we're gonna talk about this Israeli-Iran conflict amongst everything else that's going on right now. We wanted to hold off on a conversation because you felt like something big was gonna happen, and since you said that, we've had the ICE raids and riots in California, and now we have this Israeli-Iran debacle. Before we really dive into it, I'm just going to read off of disclosed.tv's Twitter feed their posts as of 5 hours ago onward of what has happened in Iran primarily. So, Israel, about 5 hours ago, shot missiles or some sort of bombs into Iran's capital, Tehran. From what I read in some of these posts, that the the targets were nuclear sites of Iran, and I know it's been talked about for quite a while that Iran has or is on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon, and the powers that be around the world don't think it's right for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Whether or not we agree with that, I guess it doesn't matter necessarily, but it does seem like why does America and Russia get to have nukes and China, but Iran doesn't? Is that only because the countries that do have nuclear weapons are strong enough to say fuck off, we're going to make them, and if you have a problem with it, too bad. So, and I know that there's been previous concern before too with North Korea having nuclear weapons, and then that kind of dissipated. I think partially because there's incompetence in North Korea's military, even though over half their budget goes towards it. What what are your initial thoughts about what's carrying on right now? Is there something deeper with the whole Israeli state? And the other thing I'll get into, or I'll leave with you, is that Israel claimed that America was in on this initial attack. And within the hour, the White House press release, Marco Rubio released a statement saying they have nothing to do with it. So there's a lot of shiftiness going on in the media. What do you know, or what have you read, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of those reports, and then there's this idea of the proliferation treaty or proliferation treaty, excuse me, uh, that Iran was a part of, and then it was so interesting that they pulled out of it. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. I forget exactly the timing. It was but they like just pulled out of it right as the talks went south, and they knew, it was just not going to go good. And really, like, it seems like the issue right now is they're looking at what, us and Israel have done throughout like the region, and in effort of the Greater Israel Project, how with even Gaddafi and all that, they were like, hey, get rid of your enrichment, get rid of all the stuff. And then they took him out. And then the same thing with Syria recently happened, or I guess it was a little bit ago now, but fairly recently. And, Iran sees that and they're like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And it's interesting because you can make the argument on whether or not they secretly have one. I think it would be pretty difficult for them to secretly have one, or if they've kind of held back because they're at that level where they can enrich the uranium to a high enough grade where it's good for nuclear weapons. And that was within the last 24 hours or so, I believe. After they pulled out of that treaty, they were talking about how, now we're going to go ahead and go up to like I think it's called grade six, or like the essentially like refining it to the sixth level of to where it's actually going to be close to viable, or viable for crude nuclear weapons, or just getting to that point where they can do that. And really, it's this line in the sand that's been drawn that's just very interesting. And whenever we are making promising gains in these talks, of course, Netanyahu, he'll just do something wild. Like within this last week, we were actually getting somewhere. At least that's what was being reported. or like leaked by the administration,
Yeah.
or from the administration,
Hmm.
that we were making good gains. And then Netanyahu was like, "Oh yeah, Iran is just totally they're we're gonna like make sure they." I don't even remember what he said, but he just threatened them outwardly, and then that set back the talks, and but really it's them just making sure that they're not going to be a part of this project. They know about the Greater Israel Project, and you've just watched since like the 90s, the mid 90s. You could even argue earlier than that, truly, but really where this plan that they have to take over that whole region is finally reaching an area where it can be at fruition. And that's very scary for a lot of them in the region. And yeah, I think they really just need to be able to protect themselves. And it's so funny, of course it's a bit, talking about Nick Fuentes can be very polarizing, but these are things he was calling out a year ago,
Yeah.
2 years ago, all of this stuff, and all it's all just been coming true back to back to back, month over month since the beginning of this year. And then I was watching him even last night, just listening. I just popped in for a stream, and he was kind of just throwing darts because people were asking, what do you think is going to happen next? And everything he said was going to happen, that the leadership would be taken out, and that they would start doing carpet bombing and this and that. All of it just happened. It's just insane. And he was kind of just like, oh, like maybe we'll kind of see, but like that's what I would think would happen next. It's insane.
Have you ever dug into Net and Yahoo?
The most digging I've done is a lot of these games he plays with the ways the Supreme Court is structured there. There's the corruption stuff going on. There's also his family lineage, which I'm forgetting all the little tidbits I learned, but he has an interesting family lineage. Of course, Ashkenazi Jew, which is, we know about Ashkenazi Jew and everything like that, and the difference between that and an actual Semite, because that would be more like European DNA. So there's that aspect to it, and then but I nothing deeper than that really. Not that I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've never really paid a whole lot of attention to him. I've known the name for quite a while. Actually, since I want to say Trump has been president in 2016 is when I kind of first started recognizing the name more often. But I think is prime minister the correct term? I might be
Yeah.
okay. Prime he's been prime minister since like 2003, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I forget. I'm pretty sure that he had taken back over in 2003. Like I think he was prime minister, and then he stepped back for
Okay.
several years, and then he came back in.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't know if 2003 is when he was initially in, and then I forget off the top. I guess we could look it up really quick, but
Well,
I know at some point he stepped back and then
okay.
he came back.
I do have a Netanyahu timeline here I could read off.
Oh yeah.
Um, so 1996, the first term begins. He's the youngest prime minister ever. And you mentioned Ashkenazi Jew. There's something significant to that. And if people haven't looked into Ashkenazi Jews, I recommend that. And maybe that could be another episode for us another time because that's a whole other discussion. But it always seems that these are the people that are in power. So, youngest prime minister ever elected, elected prime minister on a right wing hardline security platform. This is 1996. Here's the first controversial event: the year 2000 Camp David peace collapse. Official negotiations with Palestinians broke down. The conspiracy is some believe Bibi never intended to allow a two-state solution using perpetual conflict as political leverage. I think we still see that today with Hamas and Palestine. And I'm not going to be the one that holds up a sign on the side of the road and says free Palestine because from what I've seen and read about Hamas, they're real fuckers too. So, if we had terrorists on our border, I think the closest thing that America has is the cartel. And it's kind of funny how half the nation here, if America is opposing cartel, half the nation here looks at it as we're being hard on illegal immigrants. But I think Hamas is a whole nother level of terror because from things that I've seen, and again, this is Israeli media, they can be pretty brutal. But at the same time, having kids and women as casualties is such a, in my opinion, such a devastating thing to happen. It's I think about my kids, and if they were ever in the middle of a conflict like that, I can't imagine what that would be like for children. So you know, these I think these people in power, even though we have our theories about them being elite, this has to be the hardest job in the world as far as decisions go. Let's say all of our conspiracies that we see that we talk about, none of it's true, and these are just normal, hardworking people. I can't imagine how hard that job would be to make those kinds of decisions. You're essentially making the decisions of millions of lives of people, the people that you're sending over to fight for your country, the risk that their lives, and then you're also impacting not just somebody else's life, but if that person dies, their kids, their wife, their family, and it goes on and on and on until it's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? All right, so 2001 to 2005, 9/11 and war on terror era. So of course 9/11, 2001, the Twin Towers. By the way, quick
You
quick
said 1996 was when he initially got in?
yep, yep,
It's interesting timing because we just moved back into Saturn Aries, and that was the last time Saturn was in Aries.
really
hmm It's interesting.
connecting the dots.
And then I was even going to say with, just the idea of Israel too, and when it was established, the Balfour Declaration, that was in Uranus Gemini, which I keep on saying we're moving into on, 7/7 on July 7th. So there's that kind of there's this revisitation of things that we're moving into,
That was
even
post
with
World
the
War II,
civil.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was so it was like still it was post World War II, but of course Uranus was still in Gemini at that
Okay.
time. And then like this I've been finding it interesting, and I kind of went on a whole thing on my and dug in deep just the other night on my Instagram for the reverberations we're seeing with the Civil War and Neptune going into Aries, because that was the last time Neptune was in Aries was the Civil War, and we had that pop off like that was Fort Sumter, like the day of or the day after Neptune moved into Aries. But the reverberation is really weird because it's still, like because back then the Democrats owned slaves, and I've kind of talked about this before, so I won't like go super deep, but the Democrats owned slaves, and it was all about them like keeping their ownership of them. And what you've got with the Democrats now is that they've got the migrants, and they're essentially cheap labor, and they're trying to keep them in their states, the sanctuary cities. You can like tie that over to slave states, and of course, like Democrats don't like to hear this because that's like if you're still voting Democrat at this point, the driving force is that you think you have some type of moral high ground by doing it, or you want to feel like a good person, because there wouldn't be like necessarily a reason. And I'm someone who grew up Democrat, so like I can't think, that's just what I see with the discussions that I have with people. But there's that part of it. There's the idea that there's the segregation theme within these states of they're a totally different like society of people that are going on, like and all these things and then even Gavin Newsom brought up state rights, which is so interesting for a Democrat to bring that up, but that was the thing that the Democrats were fighting for was state rights, and then the Union was fighting for federalism and federal rights.
If Gavin Newsom could have his way, he'd want all of the USA to be California. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny for him to say that. And I have a lot of sympathy for those people that have been here for a long time and were, let's say, good, hardworking people. But at the end of the day, there is a process that has to be followed. And if maybe the government could maybe give those people that have been here for a while, that have actually been citizens that contribute, like some sort of priority just to get them back, maybe that could be a softer message the administration could deliver just to keep maybe some voters or boost some sort of approval rating, is just to say, hey, like they didn't do it, it wasn't done correctly, but they are priority and we're going to do what we can to keep them here. But for the time being, this process has to continue, because when you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, unfortunately. But it's gone so far. It's like you have this big giant garage that a hoarder once owned, and you want to clean out the garage, and sometimes you're going to throw out some shit that's actually valuable, and it's an unfortunate casualty in this circumstance, but it's what's necessary at this time. A lot
Yeah,
of
well,
things
and
are
it's
really
just
out of
the
control.
energy that we're
Yeah.
moving into because I've kind of mentioned those last degrees of Neptune Pisces, it's the over empathy. It's just like going way too far with the feelings, with the emotion, with the empathy. And now we're in a new cycle and it snaps back. So it's kind of just like, okay, like we need to take care of what's going on here. Okay, like the whole like fuck your feelings that we've talked about too.
Yeah.
But then Aries being the identification of people. So like how do you identify, oh, you're illegal, you're not supposed to be here, you gotta go. And the worst part is that I say that and people are like, oh, like you just don't care or anything. And I'm like, it's not that. I'm just saying this is where the energy's at. This is what we're gonna see go down. And it is very unfortunate, but to sit and to dump all of your prana, all of your chi, all your energy into something that you can't control, you know, actually going out and getting involved in something that you can control is great. But I mean, with these protests, and I do know we want to talk about these current events, but I guess I'll just say, you were talking about how I was saying like something big's about to happen because we've got these massive squares. Like that was 6-6. That was like another portal that we had. And I was like, it's, popping off after that. Then we moved in over this last weekend into all of that energy. And then this weekend's where it steps up. And then, so like on another track that I follow, which is a lady named Carlin Borchenko. And she says we study socialists every Saturday. I mean, it's all week long, but I can only devote my Saturdays to it. And we've been watching since the beginning of the year, them getting ready for this No Kings protest. So it's going to be heavy Marxism, heavy socialism. There are going to be people going there who are against like big, beautiful bill, which even I'm against. So that's like people that get pulled in, and then people that are just getting against Trump and what's going, like what he's about, people against the immigration stuff, and all of this is coalescing into that week. And as we see this stuff going on, it's just popping off all across the world with these huge squares. It's like Neptune and Saturn squaring over to Jupiter, which just moved into Cancer, and that's the home. So you got the squares on top of people being removed from their homes with the illegal immigrants, all that, and it's just all at the same time coalescing. And but we were saying this is like the second craziest week starting this weekend in astrology, like that we've been talking about.
I want to continue this timeline, but I also want to get more into the beautiful bill with you because I have been looking into it also. I want to know what it is you disagree with. But before we go further than that,
Yeah,
2000,
we should stick to the time. Yeah,
yeah,
and the what's
yeah.
going on.
So 2001 to 2005, the 9/11 war on terror for, and we're giving the timeline on Netanyahu. There are rumors out there that the Mossad had advanced knowledge of 9/11. And one way that I think I could back up that piece of evidence and make it a little bit credible is there is the tape of Alex Jones predicting 9/11 in July before it happened in September 11th. And I'm not saying that I don't believe that Alex Jones is somebody that can predict the future. Alex Jones is fed information like we saw with the whole Sandy Hook thing, and is it's up to his discretion whether or not to publicly talk about it. But for he's a person that knows a lot of people really high up, and he gets a ton of information. And again, he has to sift through whether it's bullshit or not. This this conspiracy that the Mossad had advanced knowledge of these attacks would make sense to get America over into the Middle East to continue to keep the Middle East weak and to maintain Israel's strength, also giving Israel time to continue building its defense, and continue investing its assets into its military and its Iron Dome. So that conspiracy theory honestly makes a lot of sense to me again if you kind of connect those dots.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this carryover too. You can tie it back to the assassination of JFK because JFK was on Israel's ass about being able to look into the Dimona reactor and not wanting Israel to have nuclear weapons, and but like at least not on the level at which they have it now. And because essentially what happened was it was leaked by a guy, someone in his administration that was in intelligence. I'm forgetting the name, out of Pennsylvania. That like all the nuclear secrets and how to make it that was leaked to Israel and the materials needed. All that stuff was leaked to Israel, and then they started working on it. And so JFK really like doubled down and buckled in on doing that. At the same time, you have the rise of the deep state military industrial complex, essentially the continuity of government apparatus that is our shadow government, that it's like become a breakaway civilization. And 9/11 is where you see that breakaway civilization come back in to correct the plans that they have for the entire world, for the society right there. And so there's that connection that you have there with the spillover and carryover from the Dimona reactor in 9/11. And now that's we see that playing out now because there's still this carryover, this spillover of the reverberation of that, I should say, just because of Iran just made away with the actual intel of like all their nuclear secrets and just like a whole bunch of nuclear information. Iran, this was like a week and a half ago, I believe. They were able to get an agent out with a bunch of intel on that, and Israel was pissed about it. And that's when you saw the aggression really, really kicked off and started sabotaging these peace talks.
it this the whole idea of war is almost incomprehensible to me. All the coordination it takes to even have a community fight in favor of your borders, and the talks that go on at those high levels have to be so tense at all times. Something that I just can't comprehend. I'd love to be a fly on the wall though. So I think 2005 in that neighborhood is when he stepped down, because right here on this timeline, 2009, it says return to power and Obama tension. So Obama was elected in 2008, right? So the deal with Netanyahu and Obama is they never really got along very well. And Israel was unhappy with Obama's Iranian deal, which was, what was that, like $1 billion a year in uranium? I'm not getting the exact figures right, but it was like a ridiculous, it was pallets of cash for
Yeah.
Iran to collect uranium. And what's interesting about all this, again, when we're kind of revisiting history as we're working towards our current event right now, is the difference in power here in the US. It seems one party really favors Israel and the other party doesn't. And we see that with a lot of the more extreme congresswomen left that, scream free Palestine and kind of make fools of themselves in public. But it makes me question voting Republican, because I don't know how I actually feel about Israel, and I don't know if what Israel does is the right thing. And I watch and I follow a lot of different podcasts, news sources, and I hear it on both sides. And it's, again, revisiting the whole Obama Netanyahu thing and the conflict with the two of them. What and maybe we'll get to this when we get to the present day, but like, what overall is the goal? Is Israel blackmailing the United States, and that's why Israel has the power it has? Is it related to Epstein? Epstein being a Mossad asset? Was that the whole goal? Was to get these powerful figures on camera doing things that would essentially make the whole entire public turn on them, and that's how they maintain that power? Like, why is Israel such a big deal to the US? It's a small country in the middle of the Middle East, and it's the most powerful.
Yeah, I mean the intelligence apparatus is mind-boggling too. And there was a there was a time where I thought French intelligence was better and they're great intelligence, but then I looked at where I was getting that information from, and it was a person that was totally had huge ties to the state of Israel and to Mossad. And of course they were former CIA, but they openly stated that. And so that was something I had to go back and be like, whoa, okay. But one thing I want to say about Obama, that's something I've been meaning to look back into with a new set of eyes, that Iran deal that he did. Because I look back at it now with the things I know about the intelligence world, about Israel, and just all of it, and Zionism. And I'm like, that was the one thing where it was allowed for him to actually look bad on a big scale. And it was, as far as the information I have now, like I said, I'm going to go back and look again, but I know a decent amount about it. It was against the Greater Israel Plan. It did everything to hinder the Greater Israel Plan. And so now I really want to go back and look at that because, I can be very critical of Obama, but I'll give him credit where it's due. And that's something I'm just, it's been kicking around in the back of my head for the last week. Like I want to revisit that because I have a whole new perspective on it now.
Here's the surface level terms of the deal. I had just pulled it up for you. Iran agreed to reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium by 98%, limit enrichment to 3.67 purity, far below weapons grade, cut centrifuges by two-thirds, and allow the International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors full access, maybe to the country. Maybe that's some sort of world police for you're not making nukes behind our back. In
Yeah, I
exchange
think that's
for,
that's similar to kind of Trump and the relationship with Syria. I
okay,
think it's kind of similar to that.
makes
There were
sense.
like inspectors coming in for, yeah.
In exchange for 100 to 150 billion of Iran's frozen assets released. So, in order, we'll stop. You guys stop making uranium nuclear weapons, and we'll give you 150 billion dollars. Sanctions lifted on oil, banking, and trade, and allowed back into the SWIFT global banking system. So,
Exactly. And that's kind of like it's showing like Russia too. It's like if you're gonna have this uranium and create this destabilization in the region and in the world because of the nuclear proliferation agreement that's had amongst all these nations, like, and we're not going to include you in the whole world economy, in the world markets.
so
But then of
this,
course he was able to come back, they were able to come back in with that. Well, and Trump like totally ripped up that deal,
yep.
or like set that deal back. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, so like I'm looking back at it now, I'm like, whoa, like, and then there's the whole Israel thing, and it's just tough.
It doesn't look like that bad of a deal, to be perfectly honest. The 100 to 150 billion dollars, if that did actually come from U.S. taxpayer money, then that would maybe be an issue. But the rest of the deal doesn't sound that bad. It sounds like to me is if Iran doesn't try to be aggressive with other nations, they have an opportunity to thrive, which you see with Dubai and Saudi Arabia. You know, the countries that make all that money, instead of putting in the military, they build these cities that are for billionaires to visit. Um,
Yeah,
here's the conspiracy angle um, on the deal. This is what ChatGPT decided to write out for conspiracy angle. Some believe Obama wanted to rebalance Middle East power, so less dependence on Saudi Arabia, restrain Israel's unilateral military moves, and normalize relations with Iran as part of a globalist stability agenda. Again, all things honestly that I don't really see is that bad on the surface. Now there could be things that are a lot deeper here that we're just not getting into. Maybe again another episode where we would do dig deep. But I think what my mind is telling me right now as I'm reading through this is maybe it's been the U.S.'s goal this whole time to, okay, back Israel, okay, don't back Israel, continue the back and forth over and over and over again. That way they don't maintain stability, and war does pay, whether it's oil, guns, weapons. Um, there's always a way for some of these politicians to funnel money into their bank account. Okay, like Dick Cheney with Halliburton. You can't tell me
hmm,
that Lindsey Graham isn't making money overseas. The guy wants a war every week. Um, that's I guess what I'm
Lindsey
taking from
Graham.
reading all of this.
Yeah, and it's looking back now too. because back then when I would see these things in my head, I would say to myself, oh, okay, now they are giving this side money so that we can start another war and keep it going. And I think that there will be a part of that that's always true, trying to keep the petrodollar going, war as a profiteering device, because, like we're a fiat currency can only last under war, of course, and massive amounts of debt. But you have to look back now, all the psyops we've discovered that we've been a part of. It makes you look back and wonder, was I meant to ride this train because it would bring me here? And then, like then I'd get psyched out and fooled. And
Right.
because it makes me just reevaluate all of that stuff. Because like I said, that was my understanding back then. And there was the connection with Hillary Clinton and Obama. And the thing that always I can at least like lean on a little bit, but it doesn't answer all my questions, is that there are factions of the elites that have different agendas for what they want to bring about in the world. And they tend to always be aligned with one another, like and get along. But right now we're coming into this moment where there's a lot of disagreement, and there's a certain faction which seems to be like the Knights Templars that have won out. And the Knights Templars, if you were what they were all about was back and forth. I should say one of the branches that broke off from them that still holds a tremendous amount of power. They were escorting uh, Semites, I should say, or Jews back and forth from Europe and Rome to the Holy Land. And that's like their history of where they come from. So there is this connection to the Jewish ethno religion, we'll say, that goes back centuries. And that's how these elites think, is like they've got their lineage for centuries, all of their hidden teachings, everything like that, and how they take it amongst themselves to control the masses and believe that they're supposed to lead the masses. They have like this right from God, all these things. So with that understanding of the Knights Templar that's in right now, it would make sense that they are pro-Israel and they want to bring about greater Israel, and they want to have total autonomy there, especially in the context of the world stage, so they can rebuild the third temple, which has been crumbling. The red heifer was born, it was like 5 or 6 years ago. They had to wait for it to be 5 years old. And then it was last year they airlifted like these four red heifers that were perfectly the ones that have been prophesized. No one talks about this, but this can be looked up. But they airlifted them and they've been keeping them safe, and they're getting ready to sacrifice the red heifers and then use that to purify certain priests. Is gonna, there's this whole, we are dealing with zealots right
Yeah.
now.
Right.
And then you've got which factions are religiously tied in with Israel, that's got its own faction of elites that they want to bring all this out. And then there's the whole Ahrimanic and technocratic aspect of it too. And they imagine themselves as wizards, as magicians, as sorcerer, magician, technocrat type people, just like in Atlantis, and they're trying to bring those times back about. So it's like it's fascinating and so much to go into, but
Yeah. Um, it. I think when you're talking, I think about the word lineage, and it would make sense that America has some sort of influence over an elite lineage, not just what the president of the United States is. I mean, America is fairly a new country relative to China, as far as its history goes. I mean, as far as like this civilization in the United States of America, dating back to 1776, yet we have as much power as China, but we're a way smaller country. And it goes the same even for Russia. And I know that Russia in 19 early 1900s had the whole Bolsheviks revolution also, but it's amazing to me that the US is on the same level as a China or as a Russia when it comes to nuclear weapons because of our military. And that might be because of where America is placed relative to Europe. It's basically on the other side of the globe. But it almost seems to me that it's just more and more likely that there is some sort of, as you said, lineage that dominates America, and it's some faction. And again, the word Ashkenazi Jew continues to pop up in my brain. Is is America just some sort of ant farm? That's you know
Well, I would say one of the things that I've looked at in a few different communities, but most recently with the like astrological context and the context of astrology to bloodlines and all that stuff, which is ruled by Leo. But I won't get into the astrology right now. Is we do know that all of the presidents except for like I forget if it's like two, three, or four, but they all are part of a bloodline that connects back to royalty. So there's that part. There's a spiritual thing that can be argument that can be made to that too, with reincarnation and soul groups coming back in. You can make that argument too. But then all the founding fathers that we remember that did all the big stuff, they were all, I'm not going to say they were all Freemasons. They had different secret societies, but they all were part of a secret society. And then at that time when everything was being founded here, when we were creating the country and having the Revolutionary War and all of that, this was all Pluto and Aquarius, which we've just moved back into. And now we see all of these, back then there were fear of secret societies. They were getting more and more exposed. And when Pluto moved out of Aquarius, they were able to kind of step back and lay low for all this time. But now you see all of these secret societies are getting more and more exposed. And we're only a few months into Pluto Aquarius right now. So it's like between now and a year ago, the level of awareness of the secret societies, of these groups, of these elites and all that it's probably like doubled, you know, which it was already kind of a small number, but
do you think Freemasons, the secret society, has the information to how the pyramids were built? Do you think that's why it's such a prestigious secret society?
I wouldn't say that. I think they have it so much sitting around in a place. You could make the argument for like the Vatican or something like that, but in terms of the Freemasonic temples, I mean, that information just sitting around in one place, perhaps, anything is possible. I think it's more that the families that are involved at the highest levels have their own information that they've passed down and that they hang on to, within their own records of that stuff going back to the Atlantean times. A lot of people say Babylon, but Atlantis was like right before Babylon, and then that gets into a lot of these technologies that were carried over and used, at the best of my knowledge, that are like sound technologies and all of that that can be used for weightlessness and building the pyramids in that way. But within the Casey reading, that's if you want to make the argument that it was built that recently. But the Casey readings would say that the Sphinx is even older,
The
and
Sphinx is
that
old.
and that's been found archaeologically too, and that the Giza Plateau itself, and now we're finding stuff underneath it, was there before the pyramids were built. So like the timeline I've come up with is that the pyramids were built after the fall or like sometime right before it, like and the Atlanteans were a part of this or the remnants. So it's kind of it's mixed in there. But when they got there, and this isn't just from Casey's work, but it's the first one that just comes to mind, that they found, the Sphinx and the plateau itself there, and just lots of stuff, and then they built on top of it, and they realized that the stuff they even found there before had been built on top of, which would make sense because it's an intersection of ley lines and all that stuff. So it seems like almost we look at the priesthood and on its surface the priesthood is what it is, but I would almost say like the priesthood is the forward facing group of people that are really just these knowledge keepers of whenever we had this great deception or us losing our enlightenment as humans, the fall from the garden, whichever allegory you want to use on it, and losing all of this knowledge of our true divinity, that like those sciences that are innate for how the earth works and like that just the energetics and how we can bend and use vibration, energy, all that stuff was held and kept by them, and they even kept it from the king, but they would use the king for the bloodline in a spiritual way, and they would move the society. And I think we continue to see that, but we can look back at how long the priesthood has really moved the society and then it's morphed into mystery schools and all that broke away from it, but they're just still a type of priesthood.
I think a lot about like Rockefeller was rich and powerful, and this is a lot closer of a timeline to our lives, but because of oil. And then like you, if the pyramids were truly some sort of power plant or power grid, the way that they're lined up suggests that they are, especially with these obelisks that they've now discovered. I just wonder if the person that or the lineage that had created these things has that that same kind of power that Rockefeller had, but maybe 10x, because in a previous civilization, let's say, or previous times that maybe weren't as advanced in some ways, but were in others, carried a lot more, carried a lot more of that that power through time. And I just again we're getting off track with the whole Iran Israel thing, but I just wanted to kind of get into it a little bit because when you mentioned Freemasons, I had that come up in my mind this week. Um, if if maybe that is who kind of created the pyramids, whether it was done with vibration or sound, but they that society maybe has that information that's held secret from the public. But why?
Yeah, this always brings me back to like the thing that I'll bring up is, we don't even need for it to be aliens. Like I'm always open to it being aliens and everything, but I think we are capable of such incredible stuff. And that was a thing that came up in the Casey readings is they brought up that passage in the Bible from Ezekiel. I forget. I guess it's not like technically it's one of the books of the Bible or something like that, but that passage where he talks about the wheel within the wheel and like the
Yeah, in the sky,
and
the
people
burning
equate
wheel in the
that to
sky.
yeah. And but they brought that up when Casey was entranced to him, and he he was talking about how was it brought up? It was they were bringing up UFOs and how the technology works. And essentially, the quote was, "It was like the technology Ezekiel described, but from an earlier date." And then they went further into it, talking about how the mystery schools and secret societies have been carrying the leftover technology of Atlantis, and just hanging. So, and then you can talk about the Antikythera mechanism that they found, which was this really weird type of compass star chart timekeeper before there ever could have been one. It was dated to like way farther back than it would have been. They would have had any type of technology like that. So,
Yeah,
like I always looked at that as something that was passed down and passed down and held by the mystery schools, and then just lost one day, fell in the ocean, and they found it. But and then you wonder how people were able to use the stars to navigate. I think that's like a good explanation there. But I'm just kind of it was going in a little bit with just seems
yeah,
they've been carrying a lot of this sacred knowledge and
yeah.
these technologies that are old, and they're weaving it into the new technology they're making and all of this theology that they're using. Yeah.
All right, back to the timeline. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah.
2015, Netanyahu directly addresses U.S. Congress to undermine Obama's Iranian deal. 2017, so now we're after the Obama administration, we're into the Trump administration. Trump decides to move the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. I think it was a consensus from what I heard that that was a good move. I don't know why that was a good move. I never dug into it. Do you know much about the move of the embassy into Jerusalem? Is there some sort of significance to that?
I know that there's a lot of geopolitical stuff that I'm not even remembering right now. The thing that I think of is just the building of the third temple.
Okay.
And I know that you're going to have any Zionist cheering that on because that only benefits the building of the third temple, which is, the ushering in of the Antichrist. But I'll let us keep going through the timeline.
That'll be another episode. 2019, 2021 corruption charges, multiple indictments. And this is why I thought Netanyahu was done. I never followed it closely, but I did hear of him getting in trouble. And here are the charges: bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Conspiracy, some believe indictments were selectively timed as leverage in the internal Israeli deep state power struggle. So, our president was indicted with felonies. This might be a more relatively new thing that we're seeing now, especially with how much information is out there. I think, you know, the elites want to believe that there is accountability at a higher level, and that's their example, so to speak.
It's
Two,
difficult to know about the Israeli deep state. Like I can
so
I can find information on stuff and dig really deep, but very obscure,
yeah,
very enigmatic whenever I try to look into it and make sense why JFK like was so hard on them.
they also have a really high rate of compliance within their population. I think 98% of them got the COVID shot because they were told to. That's wild.
Dang. Holy moly.
That's fucking wild. Uh 2022 to 2023 judicial reform protests. So attempted reforms weaken Israeli Supreme Court oversight. Um, I there's not a whole lot of detail with this particular timeline, but from what I'm reading here, there's something to do with some reforms of the Supreme Court in Israel. October 7th, 2023 was the Hamas attack, the worst attack on Israel in 50 years. Um, I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter that of Israel posting things to make all of us feel some sort of sympathy or empathy towards them and to make what they did to Palestine okay. And I don't know enough about the whole history of Israel and Palestine to comment on it intelligently, but I'll go back to what I said at the beginning of this episode. To murder women and children and to bomb hospitals, I think is wrong in so many ways. And it just creates the next 5 or 6 generations of those families to hate each other and to continue this fighting and this war for another millennium at least, if not longer. And as you said, fiat currency is what kind of fuels a war. If we could ever get to a time when there's decentralized currency and maybe money isn't as important as it once was, maybe we finally get away from that. But until then, these families and these children are bred to hate each other. Everybody knows a family member, a mother, an aunt, cousin that died from the opposition, so to speak, and it's just going to create that tension for hundreds of years on. 2024, 2025 war expansion, Iran strikes. So, full regional escalation underway. Conspiracy critics claim that this long awaited final war, in parentheses, the neocon faction has pushed for since the early 2000s. Israel may be trying to provoke full U.S. entry into war against Iran, which again goes back to Mossad having maybe advanced knowledge of 9/11 before it happened, right? Broader global destabilization is the real goal. So here we are. We're in a period now where we've received news from Israel saying that the U.S. was briefed on what's happening in Iran, again, to create that destabilization. This is actually a pattern of Netanyahu, as we've read through. And then there's the U.S. saying we had nothing to do with this. This was in Marco Rubio's words, a unilateral decision. With Netanyahu, you're not looking at a guy that reacts to events. You're looking at, some would say, a chess player who has always seemed to be 20 moves ahead of the player that he's playing against. This seems to me like pure, I would say, statesmanship on behalf of Israel.
Yeah, I mean, and the I mean, on top of being a good politician, he just has incredibly good intelligence.
As we said,
The
yeah.
the whole pager thing that happened, that was pretty wild. To be able to get those pagers on everyone and have them explode, that's pretty insane. And to like going through it, it took them months to do
Yeah.
to really, but so like that's the thing is that any of his blind spots or weaknesses as a politician are so compensated by the great intelligence that they have through Mossad, you know, and then any shortcomings that Mossad may have are then supplemented by the Five Eyes, which would be the other intelligence agencies of the, you know, developed countries.
I think with everything that we've read here and what we know so far, it's going to be imperative for the U.S. to deliver a message tomorrow that says we don't want to have anything to do with this. Um,
That's what's hard because right before we got on, you know, Trump was it, you know, so you we were talking about how Mark Rubio said we didn't have like anything to do with it, but then Trump was just talking to Brett Baer and he got off the phone and was reporting that Trump was aware of it, but they weren't involved with it. So then there's that. And then there was this I forget if it was like a statement, but crap, I should have pulled it up. They were just talking about how, you know, if Israel, oh yeah, that was the thing is if Israel is attacked, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but if Israel is attacked, like the United States will defend them. So there is this mixed messaging coming from the administration, and I think that's been the whole idea of what's been going on the last few months too, is there's been very mixed messaging coming from the administration, and whenever you see that mixed messaging, then there's something like the Signalgate leak, or there's these weird
mm,
conflicts within the administration that we kind of see leak out. Of course, we just had the thing that happened with Elon Musk, you know?
yeah, yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Uh,
Man.
I think what we're seeing with this cabinet of hires is what we actually did vote for, which was a combination of different backgrounds and not maybe all in lockstep as that neocon Republican. Instead, you put Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat, in. You put RFK, Democrat or independent, whatever it is you want to call him, in. Marco Rubio is kind of a progressive right uh, Republican. And then you have guys like Tom Homan, who runs ICE, who's like the farthest right you'll ever find. So
Yeah.
I think that might have something to do with the mixed messaging that we see coming out. However, I will say, based on what's coming out about the Biden admin, they kept that stuff under wraps the best they could. I don't think this administration cares about what gets out. I think honestly, I think Trump likes it. He likes the cameras, he likes the questions. He it's like it's his fuel or something. He wants
Yeah.
controversy all the time and he welcomes it.
And
So
that's in his astrology chart too. But and I would also say I think a lot of these have been controlled leaks too. It kind of
yes.
just makes you wonder about the conflicts going on within the administration because you know they're there. But
Well, and Musk did in his own way apologize, saying that he regretted the tweets, and some speculate that the whole point of those posts were to get Democrats on board with getting those Epstein files out. What was also weird about the timing was when all of that fighting happened between those two. Vance was on Theo Vaughn's podcast and Patel was on Rogan's podcast. What are the odds of that?
yeah,
So,
and then you know
yeah,
Vance has that Mars that crosses over Trump's 12th house, so hidden enemies. We discussed that briefly, and then at the same time, uh, Elon Musk and Donald Trump had opposing natal Marses as Mars was crossing. Crazy.
absolutely, absolutely. Again, I'll still take this over Kamala any day of the week. Um, but I
Right.
would still like to have a few more options because I am looking at this administration critically and going forward. Like we were just talking about today, here earlier on the podcast about the Obama Iranian deal. The way that I look at things now, as an older person that thinks critically, that deal doesn't seem that bad to me. Again, it's on the surface. The details, the deep, deep details aren't in there. Maybe somebody can correct me on it. But I don't hate the idea of the Middle East, each country maybe having its own stability. Why is it that we always want to keep others down? No wonder Iran may seem extreme to the US. I feel like it's a little bit of the same of how our parents were bred to believe that Russia is evil. And they're trying, it seems like the elites in America are trying to do it to this generation also with this Ukraine Russia war, that Russia's evil, Russia's evil. When you listen to some of
Yeah.
Putin's speeches, they don't seem too evil to me. When you're able to
Well,
translate them,
no.
he seems pretty based, to be
And
completely honest.
it's actually, you know, it ties back to this breakaway civilization that tries to control us. It's crazy because this was the same thing that JFK was dealing with too, is them not wanting, like they didn't want him to speak to I believe it was Gorbachev that was in at that time. And you know that there's this whole idea of the UFO file or the X file, whatever you want to call it, that deals with all of this technology that we call apotheum, the effects it gives off. It defies physics. That's why you have all this stuff with UFO experiences where time stands still. You stop hearing, you know, the wilderness around you. There's this effect on physics. People get pulled through walls in UFO experiences, and there seems to be some type of bleed over into the dream realm. But I'm getting off topic. Is they didn't want the Russians are on equal footing with having that knowledge and having that like greater, and this gets into the mystery school stuff, the vibration, all that, because it's all kind of interlinked into it. And then Trump, of course, his uncle alluded to Tesla files. I brought that up. So Trump is also on that same footing with this breakaway civilization, with this shadow government, just like Russia is. So they don't want anyone who's in power in the United States to be talking to Russia. They hate Trump for this very same reason, because it's on the equal footing of knowledge is where they are, so they can't control and manipulate society as easily. And that's the why that I just kind of have to look at Trump sometimes with some of this wild stuff I'm looking at lately that he's doing, where I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like enabling Israel. I have to just be like, well, I hope it's 4D chess, because he's the only one who has the knowledge to come out on top and do it. And we've seen him do it before. So I'll always have a little bit of faith in it, but it's been looking a little dicey lately, that's for sure.
It's the whole thing has been dicey, and it goes even to the big beautiful bill. Um, but maybe I've been fed some red pill propaganda, and that's why I'm leaning more towards the bill now. Um, and what I was initially against was the whole AI regulation. It being the feds will regulate AI and not allow the states to dictate that. And Mike Johnson made a point that it's more about national security. Some states may restrict more than others, and then it's behind. And I think AI is something that maybe is one of those special exemptions for that reason. Then again, I can't imagine how different a regulation of AI would be in California in comparison to like Florida. I'm sure the difference would probably be about 5 years of advancement, I would say, and that's why I do agree with the direction I guess that it's going. And then the other thing was they mentioned about there being extra spending in the package, but the way that some of the Republicans are phrasing it is that, well, if this tax cut doesn't go into effect, then we're spending like 50 trillion or 40 trillion rather than the 1.6 or whatever the number is. So it's yes, it is a spending bill, yes, but I guess it's to control future spending. Again, this is all propaganda that's being rolled out, and kind of what's become so beautiful of the internet now with all of us is we get to hear every single point of view and make our own decision. Um, so I right now I'm leaning yes on the big beautiful bill. I have to admit, one other thing I really liked in the big beautiful bill, RFK was talking about it, was for $75 a month you can have your own personal 24/7 doctor through basically the government. So you're going to have healthcare at all times. And then the other thing is inputting medical centers into bigger corporations. So if an employee is hurt or sick, they can walk in at no cost to their works doctor with a pharmacy to take care of the employee. And honestly, that's like a really damn good idea. So there, with all lies, there's some truth embedded, and in this case, with with some of the bad stuff that's going to be coming out of this bill, of course, there's good stuff embedded to make us think, okay, well, I'll take that, but I have to give on that. And I guess that's any kind of decision you make, and when you're making it as a country, it's multiple people's I would say their thoughts or their what they're passionate about. You have to include everything. So those are some highlights of the bill that I've read recently that I do that is making me lean more that way. But the whole sneaking in the 1,100 pages before within 40 hours, it reeks of the Obamacare bill. That's fucking sneaky shit. At the same time, these politicians all have access to AI. Plug the fucking bill into AI, get the talking points, and figure it out. You can do it in probably an hour. You no longer have to
Yeah.
read 1,100 pages in 3 days. It's bullshit.
And that's more of like I would say that sneakiness there definitely reeks of Palantir. I mean, all these contracts that they've already gotten and that they're going to continue to get through that bill. There's so much AI military stuff and then AI surveillance on the citizens. And and I'm like, I'm pretty much with you is I support it more than I don't support it just because like there's a lot of things I look at and I'm like, this is extremely problematic, but I understand the astrology we're moving into. This is inevitable. This is where it's going. That should be obvious. Like I've been seeing that since early last year that this is where the energy is going. There's no getting, it's been so many times now, month after month, I look at something and I'm like, oh, like the astrology says this, but I don't really, this is not the way I want it and stuff. And now I just learned to accept it at this point. So it's like, okay, well, this is where it's going. We are going to be digitally surveilled at all times. We are going to be part of the panopticon, you
The
know.
implementation of social credit score.
Yeah,
Money.
I mean, all of these things are coming forward, and it's more about learning how to resist these things in a way where by just being human, being an actual creative human that remains human and doesn't get caught into all of these, verses like the metaverse and all these different parts of augmented reality that are coming with the AI, because we're sitting here at the brink, and this is what I've been talking about with Uranus Gemini, is that ushering in. That's pretty much the sneak peek, and then it will retrograde back in the fall, and then it comes full force in like January, February of next year, and that's where we just see all of these new technologies. We'll see them this year too, but like for like in a big way next year, we're going to see that the implementation of the Aquarian economy, like all these things are changing, and everyone is so worried. Everyone wants everything to stay the same. We always talk about change, but everyone wants everything to stay the same. They're like, oh my gosh, no, that we can't, and it's like with all these different lanes we've talked about tonight, things are changing in the world, and they're going to change in a really drastic way when you've got outer planets going to the same place that they were at, and the last time for each of them, it was a war, and we're hitting all three in one year, and then we just hit new triplicities within the astrology too, of like we were in Earth triplicity. I won't even get into that, but like on building up, now we're going into all air triplicities, which is going to be about technology, about ideas, innovation, and that augmented reality, like all that falls into it. So we're coming into this world of what's real, what's not real. The amount of information that's going to be accessible to us on a daily basis is going to be insane. But keeping it on the big beautiful bill there, yeah, like they even have a thing up for they're getting ready to deploy troops here in America and abroad because they want to have portable nuclear reactors. They're getting ready for any type of situation where they're going to run out of power. We're really moving into an area where AI and the servers that it uses, that the data it uses, is going to take up so much energy that we need to not only find new methods of energy, which are things we're looking into, but be able to defend ourselves in a totally different way. Like it reminds me of Fallout and the Resource Wars. It's really making me think of that, to be quite honest, like the Fallout universe. But but
I,
all that and yeah,
I could make a case that the reason for the surveillance and the social credit score is because money is on the verge of being meaningless, and that has everything to do with quantum computing. You know,
yeah,
our entire financial system is built on encryption. Every single transaction you make, credit cards, bank wires, crypto, Fed systems, they all rely on encryption. And what would take a classical computer or your laptop thousands of years to crack the encryption, quantum computing is going to be able to do it within seconds. And to go a little bit deeper on that, quantum computers don't operate in ones and zeros like your normal computer does when you're talking encryption. It can do one and zero simultaneously. It essentially allows them to solve problems exponentially faster than anything we've ever seen. So every single private key, wallet, credit card system, central bank ledger, whatever it is, your stockbroker, no matter what it is, it can be hacked in real time, literally within seconds. So what is going to be the value of money anymore? What's going to be the point? And the other thing is with automation approaching our civilization, who's going to have a job anymore? So where is all this going? So that is why the surveillance in the social credit score makes sense, because they have to implement some sort of new control over the civilization, as we're talking about with this whole topic with the Iran Israel thing. It's I guess I'll just kind of I'll finish up on this and then maybe make your final point on Iran and Israel. But when your ownership becomes unverifiable, anyone can forge your signatures, unlock your accounts, rewrite ledgers. And by the way, I'm invested in quantum computing. It's extra money I get, I'm throwing it all into quantum computing because it's going to be the next AI as far as big, you know. And we had the internet in the 90s that really blew up for stocks, and then now AI is really beginning to blow up, and everything becomes exponentially faster the more and more the technology progresses, and that's kind of I feel like where we're headed with quantum computing, social credit score system, and the surveillance that you're talking about, as well as transportable nuclear weapons, and also can't factor out there's a lot of money going into cold fusion right now when it comes to nuclear energy as well. So there's a lot of things that I think to be excited about that's coming, but a lot of it's really scary and it's going to be happening a lot faster than we think. 2030 is going to look so much different than 2020 did. Think about how much different right now looks to 2015. And again, it's just growing faster and faster and faster. They have that palm reader at Whole Foods, you know. By the way, made a Twitter post about this. Hot mom shop at Whole Foods. I was there again today. My
oh
goodness
yeah.
gracious. I love that grocery store. Great food and better women. So your final thoughts on the war.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, it's just so beautiful. We're really in this in-between space and the energy of the year, the energy that we're being required to hold in this space too. You know, like I was talking about kind of where we're at just right now, this last week, and then the weekend we're coming into. It's incredible and these huge transitions. But you're talking about the economy being completely different and like the work, you know, and that's what I mean whenever I'm talking about the Aquarian economy. Aquarian, you know, Aquarius rules technology, it rules society and the collective and all of that. And then that's really what we're moving into is it's going to be more about the people, about the populism. You know, that's why we've seen that rise of populism too, like as we Pluto was in those last degrees here of Capricorn. But you know, where all of these transitions are coming in. Uranus coming into Gemini, it's going to get so much louder. There's going to be so much information. You know, like the we'll be able to communicate wherever we are, whenever, you know, and like look at Starlink and where that is coming. You know, people, you think you're going to be able to go out into nature and be somewhere where there's no cell reception, like that it's going to be completely covered. And then this gets into the, the golden dome Trump talks about. I won't even start to tie that stuff into the deep state because I could totally do that. But I'll do that some other time. But
It's
but but
too
you know,
creepy
like
in the morning.
I know, yeah, it's but that's really where we're at, and I agree with you on the quantum computing. Like, because I'm invested in crypto and stuff, and I really am. Within different astrology communities, numerology communities, we look at coming out ahead, there being some type of crash of even crypto that comes after it does really well, and I think it's going to be because of quantum computing. I think it's going to crack a lot of the encryption on cryptos. I think that there will be a type of blockchain through quantum computing that will be part of the new economy. But I don't think crypto is going to be where it's at, which sucks because I believe that for a long time. I've made a lot of money on crypto, but now it's like energetically with my spiritual practice, with all sorts of things I'm doing, I'm feeling this pull away from it. I'm just like de-risking. I'm investing it into myself, and that seems like that's where the energy is going to be at right now with the automation, with universal basic income, digital ID, all of these things that they're rolling in. A lot of these are parts of the big, beautiful bill. They're anticipating that. It seems like the best thing you're going to do, getting back to the point I made, is investing in yourself, being human, being creative, being expressive, because it's going to be people who do that and who get noticed and who have their ideas heard in this Aquarian economy. And then people who, and we talk about this in the astrology community, just look at screens all day and are essentially like, siphoning off of people's, energy, that they faded into the background and they're just scrolling all day. It's those are the two classes of people you'll have. And then you'll have the technocratic elites. So
To anybody that's still listening, Raffi makes a really good point. If you have that gut feeling of chasing something that you maybe did when you were younger that you were passionate about, and it's like creative side to you, pursue it. Pursue those feelings, go after them, because every single one of us are just a number to our corporations. And while they may provide stability and security, they're not always going to be there for us. And I think it's more evident than ever that there is going to be a complete restructure of society with automation, quantum. It's really going to depend on as you as a human, for sure. Any final thoughts?
I would just want to agree with you on that and say, I can seem great at astrology and all these things, like in all these different topics I talk about are of course things I learned throughout all of my 20s, but just the last 2 years digging deep on astrology when I first got into it. I was like I knew more than the average person, but I just had no idea, how I was gonna get through so much of it and make these connections, be able to do math in my head and alignments and go back to certain years. And now you can see I can pull these out of my head. I just spent lots of time investing that into myself. Now, of course, I'm like getting my website built and all these things. It's all just reaching fruition. So if you're dedicated and passionate about something, really just like as you put in more and more time into it, you'll just see it produces fruits that are incredible. And then you're just living in this flow state and in this place of passion. It's really beautiful because I know you're experiencing that too. So I just wanted to add to that because it really is something that comes out of nowhere. It just you just have to sit down and be in a certain space for a long period of time.
Yeah, yeah. Anyone still listening, like, subscribe, comment. Love to hear any kind of feedback you have to give back. That's Raffi. I'm Jesse. Thanks for tuning in on the Transformation Podcast.